Bias is a natural byproduct of the way our brains work. Week 132. A father and his son are in a terrible car accident. The father is pronounced dead at the scene, but miraculously, the son is rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. At the hospital, the surgeon looks at the boy and proclaims, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." But how could this be? His mother is the surgeon. According to a study, only 20 to 30% of humans get this right. If you're like me, the other 70 to 80% who got it wrong, welcome to the awareness of unconscious bias. You've just witnessed your brain take a mental shortcut, which leads to a mental mistake. This is an example of implicit bias. We're unaware they exist and cannot determine where they come from. We all have unconscious biases. It's impossible not to. Bias is human. Even the kindest and most well-intentioned people can be biased. The amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex make up the control panel for bias. The amygdala fires up for our fears, the hippocampus records our memories, and the prefrontal cortex controls our ability to reason and reconsider. The hippocampus is the brain's memory bank. It notes our associations and reminds us of them later. A connection. The amygdala is the fear center of the brain. This manages emotions, fears, and impulse reactions. The prefrontal cortex is where the brain settles things. We use this to reason through different perspectives, weigh pros and cons, and revise our previous assumptions about things and people. Bias is a natural byproduct of how our brains work, and it's baked into our environments from early childhood. But having bias does not mean that we're destined to be bad people. Our brains filter information through experiences and preferences to simplify thinking and decision-making. We tend to avoid information we dislike or disagree with. While we believe we receive information objectively, our brains unconsciously filter data, distorting our perception of reality. This distortion can lead to irrational decisions and inaccurate judgment about others. We like what makes us comfortable and is familiar, and we dislike what makes us uncomfortable or is different. When bias shows up in real life, it can be hard to know what to do. The key is to practice, which begins with the power of the pause. Here are a few tips to bring awareness to potential bias and start mitigating it. 1. Avoid rushed decisions. You're most likely to make a biased decision when you're rushed, tired, or multitasking. Under pressure, stereotyping is less of a cognitive load. 2. Seek feedback. Ask others for feedback to consider an alternative perspective. 3. Pause for reflection. When something supports your views, pause and collect more information. 4. Question yourself. Surround yourself with diverse viewpoints and people with different life experiences. 5. Acknowledge limitations. Be aware of your limitations and acknowledge that you may not always be right. 6. Take your time. Take as much time as needed to make decisions. 7. Practice empathy. Surround yourself with people who practice empathy, patience, and self-compassion. Retraining our biased brains will take practice and repetition. The best way to reduce the biases in decisions is to reduce the noise by gathering more data before deciding. More information leads to fewer biases. However, beware of confirmation bias, only looking for information that confirms what you already think, and be mindful of where your information is coming from. My question for you this week is, did you initially struggle with identifying the surgeon as the boy's mother? And if so, what does this reveal about our biases and how we can become more aware of them?